Captain's Log, August 1st, 1724, morning. The day began like any other, though after our harrowing escape from the heart of the Devil's Triangle, I should have known better than to believe we were safe. The sea was calm, deceptively so, as if the ocean itself had paused to catch its breath before unleashing its next fury. I stood at the helm, gazing out across the water, scanning for any sign of land or anything that could help us navigate. We had no map, no compass that could guide us in this cursed place. Our only hope was to rely on the stars once the sun fell, but even that seemed like a fool's wish given the strange forces at play in the triangle. David was beside me, as he always was, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Neither of us had slept much, not since the vortex had spat us out into this eerie calm. The men moved about the ship in silence, their faces pale and drawn. We were all waiting for something to happen, waiting for the next terror to emerge from the depths. After everything we'd been through, escaping the Goulon and the cursed island, there was no shaking the feeling that something worse still awaited us. Two-legged Sue was below deck, tending to the few injuries the crew had sustained during the maelstrom. Despite her missing leg, Sue had proven herself more capable than most of the men aboard the Kraken's Revenge. Her foul mouth and quick wit kept the crew in line. The sun was high in the sky, casting a harsh glare across the ocean, but it provided no warmth. The chill in the air had followed us since we left the island, and I couldn't help but feel that it wasn't just a change in weather. It was the triangle itself, alive and intent on swallowing us whole. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me like a heavy cloak. We had to keep moving, keep pushing forward, if we had any hope of escaping this cursed place. Midday. David was the first to see it. He had climbed the rigging to get a better view of the horizon, his sharp eyes always on the lookout for any sign of danger, or hopefully salvation. I was at the helm when I heard his shout, a warning that cut through the eerie silence that had settled over the ship. "Captain, there's something in the water!" I rushed to his side, squinting out at the horizon where he pointed. At first I saw nothing, just the endless expanse of blue that stretched out in all directions. But then I saw it, a dark shadow moving beneath the surface, massive and slow, like some great beast lurking just beneath the waves. My blood ran cold. The men gathered at the rails, their expressions tense as they followed David's gaze. There was no mistaking it. Something enormous was moving in the water, and it was heading straight for us. "All hands to battle stations!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the rising panic. The men scrambled into action, grabbing swords, pistols, anything they could find. We had no cannons left. Most had been lost in the maelstrom, but even if we had them, I wasn't sure they would have done us any good against whatever this was. Two-legged Sue emerged from below deck, her one good leg thumping hard against the wooden planks as she hobbled toward me. "What in the name of hell is that?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing as she caught sight of the shadow beneath the waves. "I don't know," I replied, my hand tightening on the wheel, "but it's coming for us." The Kraken's Revenge lurched violently to one side as something massive struck the hull. Men were thrown from their feet, crashing into the rails and the deck as the ship. I barely managed to keep my footing, gripping the wheel with both hands as I tried to steer us away from whatever was attacking us. But it was too late. A massive tentacle, thick as a tree trunk, broke the surface of the water and wrapped itself around the ship's hull, dragging us down with terrifying strength. The men screamed in panic, hacking at the tentacle with their swords, but it was no use. More tentacles erupted from the water, wrapping around the masts, the rigging, anything they could reach. "We're under attack!" David shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "It's a Kraken!" The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd heard stories of the Kraken, an ancient sea monster of unimaginable size that could drag entire ships to the bottom of the ocean with ease. But I had never believed the tales. I'd never thought I would see one with my own eyes. And now it was upon us. I tried to steer the ship, to pull us free from the Kraken's grip, But it was no use. The tentacles tightened around the hull, dragging us down into the depths. The ship groaned and creaked, the wood splintering under the strain. Men were tossed into the water, their screams drowned out by the roar of the sea. "Abandon ship," I shouted, my voice hoarse with desperation. "Get to the boats!" David was already moving, grabbing two-legged Sue and dragging her toward one of the rowboats. The remaining crew scrambled to follow, but the Kraken was relentless. Another tentacle lashed out, smashing the deck and sending men flying into the sea. I barely had time to think before I was thrown from the helm, crashing hard onto the deck. Pain shot through my body, but I forced myself to my feet, grabbing hold of the nearest piece of rigging to steady myself. The ship was sinking fast. Water flooded the deck, and the Kraken's tentacles continued to tear at the ship, pulling it apart piece by piece. I saw David and Sue reaching the rowboat, struggling to lower it into the water as the Kraken's revenge began to list to one side. "Captain!" David shouted, waving me over. "We have to go, now!" I didn't hesitate. I staggered across the deck, narrowly avoiding another tentacle that smashed through the planks where I had been standing moments before. The ship was coming apart, the Kraken determined to drag us all to a watery grave. I reached the rowboat just as David and Sue managed to get it into the water. Without thinking, I threw myself into the boat, landing hard on the wooden planks as the ship gave one final agonizing groan and began to sink beneath the waves. The last thing I saw before we rowed away was the Kraken's revenge, the ship that had been my home for so many years, disappearing beneath the water, dragged down by the monstrous creature that had destroyed it. Afternoon. We rowed in silence for what felt like hours, the only sound the splash of the oars in the water and the distant roar of the Kraken as it disappeared back into the depths. My heart was heavy with the weight of what we had lost, our ship, our crew, everything. But there was no time for grief. We had survived, and now we had to find a way out of the triangle before it claimed us as well. David was at the oars, his face grim and determined. Sue sat beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of land. I sat at the back of the boat, my mind racing as I tried to come up with a plan. "We need to find the stars," I muttered, more to myself than to anyone else. "It's the only way we can navigate." David nodded, his arms straining as he rowed. "But the fog, it's too thick. We won't be able to see anything until it clears." I cursed under my breath. He was right. The fog had returned, thicker than ever, obscuring the sky and the sea around us. We were adrift in a world of grey, with no way of knowing which direction we were headed. "We'll have to wait," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "We'll keep rowing until the fog clears, and then we'll navigate by the stars." Sue snorted, her tone dark. "If we live that long." I shot her a glare, but she wasn't wrong. The triangle had already claimed so many lives, and we were sailing through its heart with no ship, no provisions, and no clear sense of direction. But we had survived the Kraken. We had survived the cursed island. I refused to believe we would die here, adrift in this cursed sea.